Hi and welcome. This is Richard, and welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast, and joined by my co-host Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hey there.
And we have a special guest, Tim Brownson, and he owns a firm called The Fully Booked Coach, and has also developed something called the Clarity Method. And he's somebody who leads with values and helps coaches get their calendars booked up. Hi, Tim. How's it going?
Good. Hi. It's sunny in England, so it's always happy when it's sunny in England.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm in Barcelona, so it's a little sunnier down here. So my wife is Irish, so one of the reasons we chose Barcelona, Irish people have a particular dislike for gray skies, I think, because they have to endure it so much.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe we just get started. And can you share, Tim, a little bit? I know you've been coaching since, I think, 2006. Can you share a little bit about how you pivoted into coaching and what made you passionate about it?
Yeah, well, I worked in sales for about 20 years in corporate sales, and I never felt particularly comfortable. And the more successful I got, the more money I made, should we say, the less comfortable I got, because integrity is something that's important to me. And integrity, a lot of sales organizations have had integrity bypass operations. And I was given a copy of Awaken the Giant Within, the Tony Robbins book, by a customer, and says, you ought to read this. And that kind of got me into the whole self-development. I didn't even know self-development existed. I'm going back now, I'm going to guess mid-late 90s. And then I went on this sort of rampage of buying every audio book on CD that I could get. In fact, looking forward, because I used to go to the US on vacation a lot before we moved there, looking forward to going to the US because there were more available, and going and hitting the bookshops and buying as many as I could, and then driving around the UK listening to these audio books. And then
did you have Tony Robbins self-talk series? Those like audio cassettes?
I confess I did, yes. Yeah.
Those like box sets, they were like super long.
Actually, I had that. It was a CD. We were just sort of on the cusp of moving into CDs then. So, but yes, I did have those. And I think Tony Robbins is a brilliant marketer. I think his heart is in the right place. But I won't get into talking about Tony Robbins, but this sort of took me on this journey. And I was always stressed as a person, as a salesperson. I always used to get stressed about targets and meetings and pitching and all this kind of thing. And I took a stress management diploma at Sheffield University in about 2003, 2004. And then I heard about life coaching, and I went and took life coach training, really just to make me a better sales manager and just to manage my own stress and deal with my own life. I thought, this is really cool. And about that time, we knew we were moving to the US in February 2006. And I just thought, the saving grace, apart from six-figure income in sales, was the fact that I had 5 weeks paid vacation a year, and my wife worked for the NHS. She got 8.5 weeks paid vacation a year, and we're moving to the US. And I'm like, I am not going into an industry where I'll probably be lucky if I get 1 paid week of vacation a year. So I just said, you know what, I want to be a coach, to my wife. She said, that's fine. We planned on me, end of 2005, quitting sales and going into coaching. I just walked out June 2005. Once I got my head that I was doing it, that was it. I just said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going. And so I became a full-time coach and moved to the US in 2006. I had no clients. I had no clue what I was doing. Thought because I understood sales, that meant I must know something about marketing. I knew nothing about marketing. So I was just basically sat by the pool every night, drinking a beer and reading Tony Robbins books, thinking, well, doing more and more training. I did loads and spent 25K on training, on coach training. And then suddenly my wife says one day, you're not on effing holiday. You're going to have to figure this out. And so I started to figure it out and got into marketing and did pretty well blogging. Started blogging late 2006 and did well with that. Built a list of 12,000 people and became fully booked as a life coach, and then started getting more and more coaches saying, can you help me do that? So it sort of organically morphed. Started working with coaches in about 2010, and then just went full-time to coaches in about 2013. I still do some life coaching, actually, because I enjoy it, and I've still got the website, A Daring Adventure. And I don't want to be the coach that doesn't coach, because the industry is full of people, coaches now, working with coaches that don't really understand coaching. So I still do. I usually got 1 or 2 clients on the go at the time. And so that's it. So now I'm into the marketing side of things.
Love that story. What are some of the principles that you follow as a coach? Because I feel like the industry has gotten really watered down, but you're kind of like an OG. You've been there since the beginning. And I'm curious just about your actual coaching itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, I left sales because of it. At the time, I didn't know anything about core values, but integrity is super important to me, and there isn't a fat lot of it in the sales industry. And then when I got into coaching, it allowed me to operate. Integrity is important to me. Freedom's important to me. It's a core value of mine. Humor is, I use a lot of humor in my writing. This allows me to do this. So coaching, and this is with, I think, with any sort of solopreneur, you can be yourself. So the way I coach is, and now I'm more of a consultant than a coach. I do coaching that allows me to flip back and forth, which I like, because the actual coactive coaching method is very strict. You never give advice. You don't guide people. It's basically, you're a facilitator. You ask questions to help people think differently, and that's it. So it's kind of limited. And it used to be frustrating for somebody who's as opinionated as I am, if you could see the way from A to B, and you couldn't really tell the person, because that's not what coaching is, and that's not how I was trained. So now I will, flip back and forth, but it allows me to operate. I'm very upfront with my writing. I use a lot of humor. I have a tendency to swear a lot and I've talked about politics. I'm very liberal, very left of centre, and that comes across all the time. And I've made some enemies in the industry for speaking my mind and not being comfortable with some of the tactics that marketers use. And so that is my style. I am definitely not for everybody. A lot of people don't like my style, don't like my sense of humor. It's very Monty Python. It's very 70s British, Blackadder, that kind of thing, tongue-in-cheek a lot of the time. And a lot of people think I'm being serious, when most of the time I'm not being serious. I take what I do seriously, but I do not take life seriously at all. I don't think we can afford to.
Well, how do you balance that need to just ask a question and let the client find the answer versus the consulting brain? Because I kind of feel like some of the best coaching in the world is where it's a combination of both of those.
Right, I agree. Yeah, and I think it's experience. I think it's just it's trust in yourself. There's a fantastic, I don't know if it's ever a book, actually. It was an audio series I had called The Maverick Mindset by a guy called Dr. John Elliott. He was a sports psychologist, a US guy. And he talks about the training mindset and the trusting mindset. And he worked with a lot of professional golfers and American football players. And where, when you're actually in that environment, you just go with the flow. You just have those conversations. And anybody that's done anything for any length of time, I'm sure that Richard and Kylie, you're the same, that you get that stage where something comes out and you're not even really sure where it came from. It just is the right thing to say. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not doing something that's an exact science. So can I get that wrong? Can anybody get that wrong? Yeah, of course. But for the most part, it's just getting into the flow and being with somebody and trusting that the right question, or if it's not a question, if I'm dealing with somebody and they're asking me how to set up a blog post, I've done very well with SEO. SEO is probably one of my key strengths. If somebody asks me about SEO, I'd set up a blog post. I'm not going to ask them questions to elicit the answer. I'm going to say, okay, you need to do this. You need to set your title tag. We need to get the headlines, subheadings, images, alt tags, and that kind of thing. So I think it really, it's situational and contextual. And also knowing when a client is better coming to their own conclusions, and when wanting them to do that can just cause procrastination or just not getting there.
So you like to talk about values in coaching. Where did that all come to play in all of this? Like, when did you start to really focus on that?
Well, I don't know. It's the answer to where did it. So, I get asked that. So I wrote a book called The Clarity Method, which used to be called Aligning Me or Core Values, that I wrote originally for clients, to use with clients, to elicit people's core values. And then coaches started buying it, and a lot of coaches use it. Now it's different to anything I've seen anywhere else, because I talk about anti-values, which is something that originally came out of something I read on NLP, which is basically, so I've talked about like integrity, freedom, peace. You can have all these core values that you aspire to, but as human beings, we're also motivated by things we don't want. So we're motivated by, fear and hate and arrogance and pomposity and disempowerment. And so all these things, and they get neglected because a lot of people in the coaching industry, you've got to focus on what you want. Well, yeah, but I know as a salesperson, I was always much more motivated by not being anywhere near the bottom of a sales table than I was being motivated towards the top. Now, the net result's the same. If you're nowhere near the bottom, then you're going to be near the top. But the motivational factors, the stuff that's driving that. So as coaches, I think it behooves us to know what our clients are going to be motivated by. Are they going to be motivated more by the stick than the carrot? And usually it's a combination. Nobody's all one or all the other, but it's getting that combination right. So I use this a lot in life coaching, and I've taught it to a lot of coaches, hundreds of coaches that use the process now. And then when I started just working with coaches, I kind of dropped it for myself, and it just sat on the back burner. And then when the business was called Coach the Life Coach for about 10 years. And then when I was rebranding, I started the rebranding as we were getting ready to move back to the UK from Florida in 2020. And I started figuring out client journey. I'm like, the values are really important with branding. What's your messaging if it's not all about your values? So for me, I'm doing this intuitively, living my values. You can call it authenticity or whatever, but it was more just that, intuitive. It wasn't thinking about it. Okay, well, what's important to me as a coach? What's important to me with my business? Who are the people? Actually, you know what? You're probably a lovely person, but you're not right to work with me. And guess what? I'm probably not right to work with you. So I've started to incorporate into teaching coaches, look, and this is exponentially increasing importance with AI. So now, creating content, well, that's great, but anybody can create content. You've got to create content that's different. I'm seeing people, and I'm sure you're on Facebook groups, leading these long, thoughtful posts now. And I read one this morning, like, dude, that's clearly come from ChatGPT, because it sounds just like it's come from ChatGPT. There's, the uniformity. But when we can bring our values into the way we talk, that's how we bring connection, or build connection rather, with people. And that's why I think now it's never been as important. And like I said, I neglected it for a few years.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because we talk a lot about values inside Conscious Marketer and with our clients as well. And, there's that sales saying, you have to have somebody know, like, and trust you. And the trust part, I think, is where the values fit in. Mm-hmm. And what we advise sometimes is people to get clear on your value. We have a whole values process as well inside our company when we work with clients. And it's a great way actually to create content, is to choose one of the values you care about. And then you can tell stories about that value. You can share what it means to you, how it came about. You can talk about where it's ranked inside what you do. And when people know your values, what I find personally is they know whether your belief systems are similar, and then they can either trust you, or the good thing is you can repel the people who aren't, who don't want to be part of your world, and it's exactly. Like that's the greatest thing. It's just, it like shoots people away, and you're like, that's great, I don't have to refund that person later or whatever, because they never signed up, so.
Exactly. And that's how I found you guys. So I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I found it because somebody in my Facebook group, and there's about 7,000 coaches in my Facebook group, and this guy contacted me. I think he emailed me, actually, because I had a bit back and forth with him in the past. He said, you're going to love it, because I'm always talking about podcasts I like. So there's a load of marketing ones I like, and most of them, the people like, I don't know if you know Authority Hacker, which I think they're really good guys, they're genuine guys, but some of them aren't. And I'll talk about some of them. I'll say, go and listen to this episode. you're going to have to pick out the bits are useful. So I follow people who I do not really care for with their values, but I know they know the stuff, and I'll just take out little bits that, I can use that. You know what? I'm not going to use that. And he said, go and listen to this podcast. You're going to really like it. It's right up your alley. So I went and listened to it, really did like it, powered through a bunch of episodes. And that's when I thought, and you're the first people I've contacted to go on a podcast, I don't know, 2-3 years about since I bothered contacting anybody. So it was directly because I thought, okay, I love the values of this. I love the way they're talking about marketing. It's not BS. It's not, you hear the heart-centered stuff. And sometimes, this is just a marketing ploy, and it clearly wasn't a marketing ploy. I hope I'm not embarrassing you now, guys, but that's what I thought. So I contacted you, and it worked out. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. I got pulled with some, because we do summits sometimes, and we did. There was a publishing company, a pretty big one in the Bay Area called Barrett Kohler, and they hadn't been kind of courting us for a while, and I was like, you got to think of a big idea, and then they came to me and they're like, well, how about servant leadership? And and there's a guy named Ken Blanchard who has a book on servant leadership, and
I know Ken Blanchard, yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, like, let's do that. So we went and worked with him, and I was part of that particular summit I was a co-host. So I think I interviewed like 12 or 14 people. Mm-hmm. And in prep of all the speakers, what I did was I read all the speakers' books. I kind of overtrained for people. And what was interesting is that's where I made the shift to values, and I saw how important it was because every speaker on that summit, in the Servant Leadership Summit, talked about the values that led their company. Mm-hmm. And on one side, I had this like 90s feeling of like the Dilbert value systems, where companies would put this on their wall and it wouldn't mean anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I kind of just threw the baby out with the bathwater. It's I don't know, it's kind of like rejecting God because whatever religion you did something wrong to you. It's like, well,
right.
You can reject the religion, but God's still there, probably, or that's my opinion. So,
sure.
So through the summit, I was like, oh my God, the values. And then I started to see how all of these top companies, how they use it for hiring and for how they led, and how it was part of meetings. And it wasn't just some like plaque or something they put on their website, but it was really something that drove their business. And there's a couple of follow-on stories where I was in organizations helping them to figure their values out after we kind of understood how it was. But I love it. Maybe, Tim, you can share, I know you're passionate about values and marketing. How do you bring the values into the marketing to help your coaches fill their practices up? Are there like some practical tips you could give a coach or a healer listening to this right now? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point obviously is understanding values. I very rarely have coaches come to me that do understand the values. Sometimes they've done sort of vague work, and it can be very superficial to me. With my process, I always take people down to at least 8, if not, and I know some people will stop at 3, and it's like, well, that's okay, but we all hold dozens of values. And if you've got a bunch just under that are really powerful, and they conflict with the higher ones up, that's when you can start. There's a guy called Dr. Timothy, I think he pronounced his name Cycle, is a Canadian guy. He's one of the world's leading experts on and research on procrastination. He talks a lot about how values, that this can cause sort of procrastination because you've got conflicting values. So with my clients, it's basically you've got to bring it. So for example, if you've got if your number one value is say kindness, you can't go on social media being a dick to people if that's your value. You've got to live that value. Do you know what I mean? Plus, you've got to be kind to yourself. You can't then start giving yourself a hard time because things aren't going quite as well. So for me, humor is super important. I go to a lot of stand-up. I just love comedy and what have you. So if something funny pops into my head, it's going in an email or it's going on a blog post, and some of the stuff is utterly ridiculous, so it's just, and it all comes back to being authentic, and I think that's just being so overused as a word, being your true self, being authentic, but it's true. It's kind of like, it's a cliche because most cliches are, aren't they? Most cliches are there because they're actually at the kernel of them. That's how it should be. So it's basically saying, let's figure out what your values are. If your value's freedom, then, and if that means sort of freedom to travel and financial freedom, whatever it may be, that you shouldn't be working 14 hours a day. If you've got kids, if it's families of value, do you know what I mean? So it's figuring out, well, how do we form this hierarchy, and how do we then implement those both in the running of your business, in your life, but also in how you express yourself. So as I keep going on about integrity being important to me, well, that's why if I think somebody's in the industry is trying to rip somebody off, that I can't keep my mouth shut. And that's why my sales resume looked like it was upside down, because I got up to sales director fairly quickly in my mid-20s. By the time I was into my 40s, I'd gone down to sales manager. It was going like that because I couldn't keep my mouth shut, because I thought if something was BS and the customer wasn't being put first, that I would have to say so. And it doesn't work in bigger businesses. They don't like that. So with coaches, it's like, just be yourself. It's actually not difficult if you just relax and just be yourself. But, that's not easy to do because we're not conditioned to do that.
It always interests me when Richard does values exercises with our clients, because they'll get more excited about that than the webinar funnel structure that we just taught them. And we're like, no, you need the webinars, but they get so excited. And even though they're values driven people by nature, sometimes just putting it down on paper, it comes out a little bit differently than they expected. So I'm curious, what's your process to help your clients identify what their values are?
It could be tough. It could be tough to explain because it involves a matrix where I list all 8 that I ask. So I send an advanced list out to clients with sample values on, and I express that these are just samples, because as I said before, it's difficult to know in the English language how many values there actually are, what words, because you start to get to words that aren't necessarily values. So if you have a value and I say, what does that mean to you? And that teaches it. So money's a great example. It can never be a value. Well, what does money give you? Well, it gives me freedom. Or what then maybe freedom's the value. So I'll send a sample list out. We'll get 8, and then I use like a matrix where it compares them binary. So A against B, B against C, C against D. And by doing it that way, because the human brain can't look at a list of 8 things and deal with it all at the same time. We just can't deal with more than 3 or 4 pieces of information at once. And sometimes it's less than that. So we go into overwhelm. But when we do it, it's a binary. So compare one against the other, and then the next against the next, and then you end up with this complicated. I could show you, but I haven't got one here. Complicated matrix. Then you just add up the numbers, and then that gives you a hierarchy. But the thing is that it's never set in stone. It's liable to shift. It can be contextual. It can be situational. In the run up to the 2016 election, I suddenly start to see a lot of my clients having pomposity and arrogance appear on their anti-values. No idea where they could have come from, what was happening in the world in 2015, 2016. But so things will shift. You often see with younger people, maybe health doesn't appear in the value, but if they had a diagnosis, a serious medical diagnosis, suddenly it will shift up. So it's contextual, situational, but it's having that rough idea. It's a bit different for businesses. Businesses definitely can have a set hierarchy of values. But just very quickly, actually, talking about businesses doing it, an example I used in the book was Enron. So Enron had their values on their website before the whole financial scandal, and they were respect, integrity, communication, and excellence. So you look at those and think, it sounds like a good company, but clearly they weren't practicing their values. So I think values should always be inward facing in a business. They should be there to remind the people that work for the business, this is who we are, not sort of overtly saying to people, this is who we are. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's part of the nature of being human, is this truth versus falsehood. I think I don't know if you've read Dr. David Hawkins' work, but he has a book called Power versus Force, and he actually mentions Enron and the values in some of his talks. His premise is through kinesiology, you can tell if somebody's telling the truth or not. But yeah, it's like that's why you can almost, like through intuition and your gut, you can almost feel if somebody's just kind of, I don't know what the word is, if somebody has values but they're not living them. it would seem like kind of from like 2018 to like 2022, every week I'd see somebody just get hammered on social media. And I'm kind of a positive person, but in some ways it was good. It's good when just the truth is out in the open, and we all make mistakes, but when somebody's really not who they say they are, then, it's better that the world knows. And so I think that's a blessing of the transparency on social media. I wanted to share two insights with you about values, and this is just an interesting discussion, but one is I found that my clients assume, falsely I might add, that people know what their values are. They just assume that people know like what they care about in the world. And what I've actually found is like, most people don't know what's going on inside you. Most people don't know what you care about or what you're thinking and how you lead your life. So you kind of, my thing when I coach or consult or whatever is to make it clear, first of all, just to bring out that like most people don't know what you stand for in the world. And so like part of your role to market your business and to attract the people who should work with you is to kind of like put your values out there. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you put them out there, but I think you put them out there in how you present yourself. So, obviously our brand is what people say about us, and our branding is what we do to influence that. So to me, the brand is the way you write, the way you position yourself, the way you talk, the way you interact with other people, that expresses your values. Do I think coaches should have the values on the website? I haven't got a problem with that. It doesn't bother me, but there is that Enron feel to it that why do you need to put your values? I think but I understand what you're saying, that people don't know what your values are, because I don't think people stop to think what somebody else's values are. There's this intuitive, do I like this person? Do I trust this person? Nobody's, going back to my own situation. Sorry, go on.
Oh, well, it doesn't have to be that you have to list them out, but you have to make a concerted effort to like tell the story that shares a value or tell your backstory so we're clear, it's not like a list. It's like you have to go to this page.
Yes. Go and look at our core values page. No, well, I definitely agree with that. I'm big on transparency, and yes, backstory is super important. I think with any coaches telling how they got into coaching, and that sort of highlights the values without highlighting the values. So I think we are saying the same thing. I just misunderstood what you meant.
And this is kind of interesting because I'm on your website here, and you have a section called Coach People, and it's kind of interesting because you say the Villa Pisani Labyrinth in Italy is listed as the most difficult maze to find your way out of in the world. And then your next line, this is super funny. So this shares some of Tim's values here. Just from this sentence, Napoleon supposedly got lost in the Villa Pisani, and not because he was a short arse who couldn't see over the hedges. They're 8 feet tall. Nobody could. And then you go on to talk about the coaching industry. But you kind of bring your values out in your actual copy. Mm-hmm. Like I can see you're a super funny guy, and so I know that, if I want a serious mind-oriented coach, you're not my guy probably, right? Like you're
No, one of the things I do in a consult, Rich, is I'll always say something that I think's amusing. No, I won't plan it out, but something on the call, and see if somebody laughs. If they don't, I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. I need, because I can't, if I think of something funny, I run 2 masterminds, the people on the mastermind. Often I'm in fits of laughter, but we get a lot done as well. You can laugh and be productive. But I want to do that because, that's what I enjoy doing, and I want to enjoy my work. And it's fine. I work for a company called ADP, Automatic Data Processing, the world's biggest payroll company. And I can remember being in a meeting with my area manager at the time, and I made a joke to, in the UK, we call them FDs, finance directors. It would be the CFO here. And the room went quite stony quiet. And when we got outside, my manager turned to me in the parking lot, and he says to me, "Don't ever make a effing joke to an FD again." And then stormed off, got in his car and drove off and left me stood there like, what? So then I realised, actually, it's probably not the kind of outsourcing HR probably isn't the right thing for me, and payroll,
Well, it's so funny because you have series now like Ted Lasso, and he makes all this weird humor that, you know, like the people over in England or whatever don't get. But my experience of, because in my mid-20s, I moved to England and lived there for a short bit in London. And I had to I was made fun of so often because so to get the piss taken out of you, I had to figure out this like British humor. And then I lived in Hong Kong for 5 years, which is kind of the same thing. You know, there's a lot of British people at the time. There were a lot of British people there. So it was super funny because I had to rewire my brain to understand the humor. I can imagine you inserted in the US is like the reverse. So everybody has their own type of humor, you know.
Well, my favorite expression in the world that I couldn't is taking the piss. It's got so many uses, and it's just taking the piss out of somebody, and you don't use it in America. I tried to export it to the US at 14 years, but no, nobody got it. But
Americans are far too serious to take the piss. Well, my second point that I was going to ask you about is, do you think some values can be situational, like where, you know, like when you're in business, you have to be one way, and you're in family, you have to be the other way. Are we creatures where in certain kind of fields of play or environments we need to shift our values, or what's your opinion there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, in fact, I know so that they can shift somewhat. So, and I'm on the spot now, so I'm going to think of an example. Okay, so let's take arrogance as an example. So you can have a social arrogance in a personal setting, but then you can have arrogance, or like a business arrogance, like a performance arrogance. You often see that with people who are super successful at sports. They may be very arrogant in what they do, but they're not necessarily arrogant people. So that can be something that's situational. And people often looking from the outside in don't get that. You know, I've worked with a couple of professional sports people way back in the day, and they would appear to be arrogant, but actually in real life they're not. So that's one. I do think, and it's been a way. You know, for example, it may be that you've got a value of love that you can demonstrate most of the time, but you're a bail bondman. That's a terrible example. I don't know, but something where it's not quite as easy. You can probably use it a little bit, but it's not primary. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you were in a protector role for your child or something like that, it's not the time to...
Exactly. So honesty is a good one. Yeah. So you can be, when people say I'm always a little bit not suspicious of it, because, the example I always give is Churchill regularly lied to Parliament during the Second World War to spread misinformation back to the Nazis. Was that wrong for him to do that because he was being dishonest? Well, politicians lie all the time, So sometimes there's a context. If you tell a friend who's really sick, they're looking a little bit better, is that wrong? Well, I don't think so. But then you may not want to do that, in a situation to a client. Yeah, I can help you. Yeah, I hear this all the time. I didn't turn a client down, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get a lady from last night wants to make $300K in the first year without using paid ads organically. So I'm pretty sure you can't do it. And she said, well, 2 people have told me I can. Better write them then, because they're clearly a lot better than I am, because I wouldn't know how to do that organically.
Right.
So you use a term that I'm super curious about that I've never heard anyone use before, and that's anti-value. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, these are the flip side of values. So like I say, it's words like, aggression or anxiety or fear or hatred or, just even procrastination, the things that people just don't want to be. So I always describe it like these can be traits you see in yourself occasionally, because we've all got traits we see in ourselves that we don't like, or they can be traits you see in other people, or they can be more conceptual, more nebulous, not just some sort of esoteric sort of feeling. And, so I said before, I talked about in 2016 with the election when Trump was running to be become president, I started to see pomposity and arrogance and narcissism appear on people's anti-values. Now, I'm sure that whatever your political beliefs, I've stepped over the line here, haven't I? But the reason being was because they were on display and people were seeing it, and people were more aware of things that maybe they didn't like. So sometimes we have to see traits in other people, and we think, actually, that's something that can motivate me either not to be like that myself, to work on myself, or not to work with people like that. I got hired by a guy in the US not long after I moved there, who I thought was very wealthy, lived on a gated community in a place called Windermere, which is a very wealthy area of Orlando. And he was ripping off his employees. He took great pleasure in showing me a spreadsheet where he'd taken $18,000 out of his business that month and not paid his employees anything. And so that to me is like, I've got to go. I literally walked out there and then I just can't work with you. So I think that's an anti-value. It's being aware of what we're not prepared to tolerate. And sometimes I don't want to sound, pompous myself saying that. It's a personal thing. It's what I'm not prepared to tolerate. What you're not prepared to tolerate, Kylie, and you, Richard, maybe something completely different, or will be things that are completely different, be overlaps and so on. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And sometimes we'll even do that we definitely do it on our webinars, but a lot of times we'll do it on a sales page. Sometimes we'll say, who's this course for? Who's this course isn't for? Right. And we'll try to call out, actually like traits or personality things, or a lot of times people, want everything to be easy, and I'm happy if we can make it easy, but a lot of times it requires doing hard things and pushing yourself a little bit too, Yeah. So I'm not one of these like it has to all be easy or it has to all be hard work. I'm more like, well, sometimes it's going to be really hard work, and other times it's just going to start flowing. You're going to be like, exactly, like, how did all these clients just come in here? And you're like, okay, this is good stuff. Yeah. Well, it's been really great talking to you today, and I feel kind of like we're kindred souls trying to help people get their work into the world through sales. We'll have to maybe do another podcast at some point about how to overcome sales barriers, because I know a lot of coaches.
Ooh, I would love that.
Yeah, a lot of coaches and healers and conscious people, and they sometimes, marketing is like, I don't know, like the shallow end of the water for the non-swimmer, but like I'd say like sales is like the deep end, Yeah. That really trips them up.
I mean, I still love the process. I hated the industry, but the technical element of sales and the mindset element of sales, I really, because it's a skill, and the sad thing is people who've really got a lot to offer that hold themselves back, and it's often the people who haven't really got much to offer that will push forward with sales. So yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, Tim, if people want to find out more about your work, I know they can go to thefullybookedcoach.com. Is that right? Yep. Is there any other place that they can look? That I know you're on social media.
Yeah, there's very few places. I have got the Fully Booked Coach on Facebook as a group. Anybody can apply to join, but it is only for coaches. I don't like any marketers, and it's a safe space for coaches. The Clarity Method is available on Amazon. I am going to rewrite it, actually. Well, I'm in the middle of doing it, but who knows when I'll finish it, because I like freedom as a value. So it's the summer and I don't really want to work that much. I want to go to the beach with the dog. So that's about it. I'm on LinkedIn somewhere, and I don't know,
Okay, well, thanks for reaching out, Tim. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. And thanks all the listeners today. You can get this episode and all our other episodes if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify at consciousmarketer.com/podcast. And you can also sign up for our list. And if you want to do us a favor, we don't run any ads on here. And all we ask is you share it on social media and or leave a comment on one of the platforms. That helps us grow our listenership so that we can reach more people. Thanks again, Tim. Thanks, Kylie. Yeah. And we'll see everybody on the next episode. Bye for now.